Justice.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, but is it really that interesting?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Redshirt Me, because yes, it is. You see, in the grand old US of A, we got this thing called the Department of Justice and its judicial system. You know, you ever heard of that top dog called the Supreme Court? Ever heard of it? Yeah, thought so. Now, what if I told you that this baby right here is actually flawed? The American justice system is riddled with flaws and imperfections? How could you say such a thing? I know, Redshirt Me. It's shocking, I know. But in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly why I think my plan is better. So in no particular order, we're going to go over selection and tenure of judges, number of courts, division of labor among the courts, the process litigants go through at trial court level, and formatting. Now enough lollygagging, let's get to it. For each of these factors, I'm going to provide political and societal issues, explanation of decisions, alternatives, and why each alternative was not selected. Now, the way I did this is not in any particular order. I gave all my alternatives at the very end of the paper. So when I read over a change I would make, I'm not going to get to the alternative until I get to the end. And then when I talk about that alternative, I will also at the same time explain why it's insufficient. Wow, you really know what you're talking about and totally didn't just read all of that off of the PDF that was posted for the students' use. Thanks, Redshirt Me, but it's time to get started. So we'll start off with the societal issues. In the United States, we have more than our fair share of societal issues, and we'll touch on a few of them as we go along, some more than others, such as systemic racism. That's a big one. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people like to talk about it because it's a hot button issue, and it gets views. It gets popularity. But we're not going to get into all that. We're just going to talk about some statistics. They might be controversial. They might not be. That's not my fault. I didn't collect them. All I did was use them as a defense for my argument. So, but we'll get back to that. So, selection and tenure. I already think, regardless of whatever happens with our judicial system, term limits need to be in place. And not just in the judicial system. I think across the board, term limits need to be put in place. An alternative that we will get into later, and I'll explain it, is age restrictions. The argument could be made that that's ageism, and we'll go into that. But also, it's kind of a weak argument because from what I've been told, I can't back this up, but from what I've been told, police officers are required to retire by 54. It might be different. It might be parole officers or probation officers. I can't remember correctly. But essentially, there is certain government jobs where you are required to retire by a certain age, to the best of my understanding. So, selection and tenure. In my system, justices would be appointed and confirmed in pretty much the same fashion as currently in place, but once confirmed, they must renounce all ties to any political faction and must be restricted from receiving partisan resources in any capacity, professional or personal, whether it's financial or something that's not technically financial, like if a Republican senator were to buy a Supreme Court justice a boat and say, oh, it was a Christmas gift just because, we're friends. Even the richest of rich white guys don't buy each other boats. I mean, I don't speak from experience, but come on. So back to term limits. Term limits would be imposed on the Supreme Court. I thought about it for the lower courts, but I'm not entirely familiar with how appointment and selection, or if it's elections, or whatever it is. I'm sure we talked about it at some point, but I can't rightly remember. So as far as term limits go for Supreme Court justices, here's what I would implement: 12 years, a 12-year term limit from the year you're appointed and confirmed to the end of the year that is your 12th. That gives a Supreme Court justice more than enough time to decide on many high-profile cases. Even if they don't make a bunch of huge decisions, they'll still be on the bench for long enough time that they had a meaningful impact on the justice system, but not so much that they cause more damage than is necessary, I guess. I know what I want to say. I'm just stumbling because it's hot in here and I can't turn the fan on without ruining the sound quality, so bear with me. So retirement options will be the same. So if a justice is appointed and confirmed and they want to retire their 3rd year, their 11th year, they want to retire before the end of their 12th year, fine. Do whatever they want as far as retirement goes. But once they are appointed, they remove their ties to any political group. That I am severely biased towards. That's something I would have to see, because as a justice, while it is good to have multiple justices from multiple backgrounds and diversity within the group, they should not make a decision on a high-profile case, or any case for that matter, just for political clout. I think that's, whether or not it's constitutional, I think it's wrong. I think involving political parties in judicial decisions is just pointless. I mean, it definitely has a point. I mean, if there were a gun control law that were supported by a Republican, it would speak volumes to, hey, maybe this isn't so bad, to conservatives that are, or even liberals who are gun owners. Same with abortion, even though it would be a much more controversial decision. If there were a conservative to support it, it would be a little less, well, okay, I couldn't say for today's America, because we've seen plenty of Republicans get strung up by other Republicans just for making a semi-liberal decision, such as confirming the new president. So, without getting into all that, let's backtrack. So, the selection and tenure, like I said, appointed and confirmed the same fashion is currently in place. The president appoints them, the Senate confirms them, same system all the way down, even for other federally appointed justices. Now, at a lower level, and I didn't mention this in the paper, at a lower level, it would be a little bit less important to for a justice to renounce all political affiliations and all that. So I would say that stays exclusive to the Supreme Court, but I think I've spent a little too much time on this topic. So here's where I got a little bit confused. I didn't know exactly where to put this, because these things could be part of other parts of the courts. So I just got into it up here at Division of Labor. So the number of courts in Division of Labor. The number of courts, the only thing I'd change is in the circuit court. I'll get into it. I think there should be 13 instead of 14 districts, essentially splitting up the 9th. That's it. I'll go into it later, but it's not super important right now. So this is what I meant by I didn't know where to go with this. Misdemeanor and non-violent drug offenses. Any non-violent offenses, such as I think larceny is a non-violent offense. That's where you steal without burglarizing, I believe. I might be wrong. Someone in my peer review, please tell me, or please confirm or deny. So misdemeanor and non-violent drug offenses are make up a majority of court cases. So if we were to get rid of the non-violent cases and have them handled by a separate committee, such as a JCPC, which is a Junior Crime Prevention Council, or similar group. I don't know if anyone's familiar with a peer court, essentially where instead of taken to actual court, you're tried by you. First of all, that's not important. You're essentially tried by your classmates or your colleagues, depending on how the system works. And this is what this would be: is you would be, you would be evaluated by peers, by your peers, sort of like a jury, and they would determine whether or not what your sentence would be, whether it's community service or full on rehabilitation, a mixture of both, whatever. Mandatory minimums, selective removal of mandatory minimums. I think mandatory minimums are wrong, except for violent crimes. Violent sexual crimes, anything in that nature, keep the mandatory minimums. That I don't have a problem with. Hurting people shouldn't be, oh, it's okay, you'll get a second try. Whereas, oh, I was caught with a gram of weed. Okay, I think that's reasonable. So, as I said, the Supreme Court, 12-year term limits, no chance of reappointment, prohibition of political affiliations within the Supreme Court. They can cause justices to stay on the bench longer just because they want to wait until a president with a likewise ideology is elected, which is what Ginsburg attempted. And while I love her, it was a bad idea because Trump ended up getting to appoint a Republican anyway. So the circuit court, 14 courts. Ninth would be divided into 2 circuit courts. The 14th circuit would be Alaska, Washington State, Montana, Idaho, and Nevada. That's because of the population disparities. Whereas the 13th circuit would be revised to only have Hawaii, California, Oregon, and Arizona. So California, that big one, and then Oregon, kind of big, Arizona, okay, Hawaii, pretty small, and then the 14th circuit, Alaska, Washington State, Montana, Idaho, Nevada, probably those, 5 states alone pale in comparison to California's population alone. So this would significantly reduce caseload on the 9th circuit, or the 13th circuit, or the 9th circuit. I'm running a little long, and I apologize for that. I will edit some of this out. So removal of cash bail is under district court. I'd get rid of cash bail altogether because it really only works. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. In my eyes, the only purpose it serves is to keep cells full. But I understand that it could be used as a preventative measure, like say someone was accused of a violent crime and they're awaiting trial. Okay, you put a $100,000 bail on them, like someone in my county had. That only works if the defendant cannot afford bail. If the defendant is part of a upper class, if they have the money to do that, to post bail, they will, and they will be out, regardless of whether or not they're a threat to society. So it really only works on poor people, or not poor people, but the middle class and the lower class. I mean, it's been shown that the average citizen can't afford a $500 surprise charge. So how are they going to afford, a $100,000 bail, let alone a $10,000 bail? Like, it is only working against the lower classes. But we'll get into that. So instead of cash bail, there would be a system similar to parole or probation. where there's predetermined meeting dates, times, and locations where the defendant would meet with an officer, like a parole officer, and they would overview the activities since their last meeting. So depending on the severity of the crime and depending on the threat they pose, would determine the lengths of time or the amount of freedom they have. I mean, they could even be put on house arrest rather than bail. And these are alternatives we will get into later. So the litigation processes, I would legalize plea bargains. Really the only difference I would make. They're a predatory practice and they infringe upon the defendant's rights. I'm reading off of the paper, so it seems like I'm doing that. Every defendant should have the right to appear before a judge appear before a judge and a jury of their peers. They should be allowed to present their case. That's a constitutional right they have, and I believe they should be allowed to exercise that regardless of what their attorney thinks is best. Because chances are, if it's a criminal case and it's a low-profile criminal case, the attorney does not care about anything other than getting paid. I think we can all safely assume that. So insufficient alternatives. We're getting towards the end of it. So age limits rather than term limits. Aside from the obvious ageism involved, placing an age limit rather than a term limit could produce inexperienced justices and would most likely have a more negative effect. It doesn't make sense to put, 30-year-olds on the bench when they've hardly been practicing law for, 10 years. I think experienced justices are essential to a strong Supreme Court, but I don't think that we should have people in there that it's easily questionable of their mental state. If it's easy to question their mental state at a certain age, which it is, past 70. I think 65 is a little young, but 70's about right there. From personal experience, my grandmother had dementia. It's a tough decision, but I think that there should be age limits anyway, but they're insufficient. Circuit redistribution. It could be argued that moving states from the 9th district to other districts would be a more effective process. So instead of creating a new district, we would just move certain states, as I've done. I think this would just increase the course load on the remaining circuits, and the district would be drawn extremely wonky. It would be a difficult process. Too difficult to be a better alternative. Mandatory minimum reduction. Rather than getting rid of them, we reduce them. I still think it's insufficient because there's mandatory minimums either way. But also, I wouldn't remove mandatory minimums from violent crimes. So it's a bit of a tough one there. But I don't think we should reduce non-violent mandatory minimums. I think we should remove them altogether. Because reducing it is a step in the right direction, but not the solution to the problem. Reduced cash bail, same thing with the mandatory minimums. Why reduce it when you can just get rid of it? Cash bail is essentially put in place to keep poor people in jail rather than getting their affairs in order between arrest and trial. It would be a much better idea to just get rid of cash bail altogether, because the people who can afford it, it doesn't work. And the people who can't afford it, it only causes them more strife and issues. So I think bail should just be gotten rid of completely. Plea bargain guidelines. Rather than completely remove plea bargains, we could introduce strict mandatory guidelines to, keep them on a straight and narrow path where they aren't technically illegal. They'd be legal, but they would also have legal guidelines. I still think it's insufficient, even if the defendant consents to the plea bargain. I still think it'd be taken advantage of greatly, and it's not something that should be a part of our justice system. Misdemeanor and nonviolent drug offenses. Why not just legalize all drugs? One, it's unrealistic. I mean, it's not Portugal. We're not doing that. It would create more issues than it would solve at first. I think over time, legalizing all drugs would have a better result than just reducing these nonviolent offenses. But if we can reduce the severity of the sentencing from small nonviolent offenses that are drug related or not drug related, I think it would show over the next couple of years as incarceration rates and arrest rates even would significantly plummet. And that's about it.